official take one for the conversation between two boys. All right, let's go.
Hi, we're here to talk about The Gate. Randall William Cook.
Oh yes,
Randy.
Randy, yeah, it's more. That's Randy Cook and Tibor Takic. I don't even know your middle name.
Stephen.
Stephen Tibor Stephen Takic. So there you go. Is there a Z in SZ?
No,
T?
no. Stefan or Istvan.
Istvan.
There
Yeah,
you go,
see.
yes, yeah.
Then it is Istvan, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
Well, you should have said that.
Well, I forgot.
Anyway, hi. We're here reminiscing a little walk down memory lane. Probably not hand in hand, but you never know.
I saw one of the questions was, how did we ever get together? Or how did we ever find each other?
Greg Jean.
Greg Jean.
Yeah.
He's the guy that introduced us, and I think his claim to fame at the time was he built the models for Close Encounters, or
And many things. He was like the top miniaturist in the business at the time.
And,
certainly in the fantasy business.
And we talked a little about the script, and he was busy. I can't remember, and then he said, you've got to see this guy, Randy Cook, and okay, I put you on the list, and then I met with you, I gave you the script, and right away I had a really good vibe. As soon as you responded, it felt like you were talking about the opportunities that this presented as opposed to the limitations. Every other person I spoke to spoke about, low budget, fast schedule, how could you ever do any of this stuff? But you talked about, wow, this is cool, like we can do this, we can try that, we can do this. And I thought, well, this is the man.
Well, I was desperate. I hadn't at the time worked on something that I'd really enjoed, that was really challenging.
Yeah, where were you working?
I was working at Richard Edlund's place.
Yeah, and I went to see you there.
Yeah, and I was just basically an oarsman on a death ship, and I was dying to get off, and then here's this other ship steaming by, and thinking, this looks good, this, and I read the script. It was a good script, and you seemed like a good guy, and you seemed amicable, and you seemed we just had a good, response to
Yeah, my philosophy has always been collaborative. Part of what I liked about what you'd said was your approach to the comedic part of this. I always consider horror movies to be almost like black comedy.
Yeah.
And without winking to the audience.
No, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, and you seem to sort of tune right into the type of humor I thought should be in the movie. I didn't want it to be absolutely serious. So most people I spoke to just sort of take it that way, or they want it to be campy.
And most horror movies, that's and we like Lubitsch and Sturgis and Wilder and people who are a lot higher class humorists than the lower class campy ones. And also horror movies to me are very seldom really scary. It's certainly not monster ones, and so you look for something else that's just an exhilarating aspect to the films. And this thing had little monsters and big monsters, and I thought, well, God, we get to do monsters. We get to design monsters, and it'll be great, Yeah,
and it had a context that you could have fun with.
Yeah.
You were inside the kid's imagination, and that was always, to me, a very important thing, is to put it in a context where we could enjoy whatever fun we were going to have, the fear, the funny stuff, the gags, just because we were in the kid's imagination, and that gave us license to do just about anything. The monsters could look, not exactly, photoreal, but it's in their imagination. This is how they saw it. So it was like a context.
Well, it wasn't really hard to access at our tender age then, the feelings and
the
emotions of kids, and being in touch with our inner juvenile delinquents, right? And the creatures were, just fun to do, and we both, I think, wanted to come up with something that was different than what was being offered up in those
Exactly,
days.
yeah,
you
which
know?
was Freddy,
Freddy,
which I
slasher,
enjoyed,
yeah.
but you know, it's not the, I don't know, my favorite horror films, like classic to me, um, um, Snow White is a horror film.
Yeah, yeah,
Because when
yeah,
I
yeah,
saw it, I was frightened to death. That's one of my first film experiences. Was watching, you know, Snow White, and then the scene in the forest with all the eyes opening. That to me, but the sort of
Surreal as well as horrific,
surreal, kind of a European approach to psychological horror.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that happens in the mind. It's all how you see it, how the kids see it, and that the script had that. A production viewpoint, I remember that the whole sort of schedule was designed around being able to allow you a complete room, like a stage, to build your set, tear it down, build another one, tear it down, build another one.
Well, that was funny because we were at Kleinberg, right?
Yeah, yeah.
At Kleinberg Studios, and right after The Fly moved out of there,
Yeah.
and we were worried that there were going to be a lot of flies on the stage.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell we were thinking. Too literal, right? But anyway, so we got there and we had the effects stage and we had the others. We had a live action,
Yeah.
principal photography stage, and the thing was, we had planned everything out very carefully for these shots, of course, and we've been planning for weeks and months. And we got there, and they were planned out, but we didn't have the time to shoot any tests.
Yeah.
So
everything
basically,
was a
the test
Yeah.
is what's in the movie.
That's right. I told that to somebody the other day. They didn't quite understand what I meant, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean that was it. 'Cause we didn't have time. We had to get it
Yeah.
on take one.
That's right.
And if it wasn't quite right, so be it. But they were planned out, and it was the method for planning them out. You dream it up first, right? And even our great art director, Bill Beaton, who was wonderful. At first, he didn't get what I was getting at when I was talking about these things. And I said, well, look, let's say that corner over there is what it's gonna be, and you aim the camera. You put the camera here, so you're 3 feet off. You're 3 feet off. Let's say this is 3 feet. You're 3 feet off the ground. And it's quarter scale. So the camera's really got to be 12 feet off the ground. So that means with simple addition applied, addition and subtraction, the camera's got to be on a 3 foot tripod on sticks 3 feet off the ground. But that ground that you're putting it on has got to be 9 feet off the studio floor, because that section there that we've taped out is going to be cut out in the foreground, right?
Yeah.
In the foreground live action piece that is 1-to-1 scale, and you see through that, and that you see beyond has to be built 4-to-1 scale, right? And you've got to have every point measured out from the center of the lens so that it lines up.
And you have the nodal point head.
Yeah, so you could
so
do
the thing moved on the film plane, and you could actually do camera moves.
pans and tilts were about as far as we could do as much as we could do in those days on camera moves before we were really freed up by the computer. But it was more than a lot of films had. You couldn't pan and tilt around. And so effect shots were usually then nailed down, right? Nailed to the floor.
So that's what
although we did do that Minion shot, we did Minion, Bannister, Demon Lord, his first close-up, where we went
motion control
through. Yeah, it was fake motion control, right? And we had to go through a 1-to-1 door thing to past the Minions, who were 4-to-1, right? And then up to the Demon Lord, who was 12-to-1, maybe. I mean, he was 12th scale, I think. So it was 3 scales working in that one shot, and it was all just sort of grabbed on the fly.
Yeah, some fun stuff.
Oh, it was, and it was very exciting.
Yeah.
I'm getting excited just reminiscing all these years later, because there was a lot of adrenaline that went into these things. And at first, the guys who went off onto my unit, the effects unit, second unit as it were, but it was called effects unit, and they didn't want to work effects unit. We don't want to do this. God damn it, we want to be where the action is, right? And I said, look, I gave them a little speech. I said, look, we're going to be doing something different, so we're going to have a closed set. It was only for a little while.
Yeah.
We're going to have a closed set. We're not going to tell people what's going on. And then, whatever. And so we built a shot with with girl in the foreground standing on. I don't remember which one was the first one, but it was one of the. It was a fairly showy shot to get started off on, where you tilt down from the girl and she's standing there.
Yeah, in the garden
and
the
in the garden, the minions.
Yeah, yeah, that was.
And so it was starting to come together, and the guys were sort of working begrudgingly on this thing because they were working for.
Till you see it, you don't get it.
Yeah. And so I had everybody in the crew troop up, get on the ladder, and troop up and look through the lens. And by the time that was done, they were saying, "This is really cool."
Yeah.
I said, "Don't tell anybody how we're doing this." Okay. And so we became sort of a secret society.
Yeah.
It was pretty neat until somebody somebody in L.A. called us. I think when the Minions ran up the stairs, which was shot. I just saw a tape of that, and the slate said May 6th, 1986.
That's right. Yeah.
And how did you get these Minions to move? How did you do this? Blah blah blah. And when I finally told them how it was done, they said, "That's all." I said, "Yeah." Well, that's no big deal.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, that's why you don't tell people that there's a trapdoor underneath the magician's top hat. Right?
Yeah.
We were working out of my
Apartment.
And we just sit and talk and do storyboards. So we did have a chance to really sit and plan out all these shots once we'd done it. Once we decided what the approach was going to be.
Yeah.
But one day, the ideas weren't coming, and the drawings weren't working. And I said, I'm really dry. And Tibor said, well, that's okay. Let's design the Minions. You don't design the Minions. I'm not a machine. You don't put a quarter in and you get a Minion out.
You wind up the key.
Yeah, I know. But I said, okay, yeah, because we're on the clock and what have you. So, I start drawing, and it really came easily. Now, I'd been a Disney cartoonist for a year, but I was kind of out of shape drawing, and I was starting to get back into shape doing the storyboards, but the character design, it was a little tough. But anyhow, this thing was just flowed. I looked at Tibor and I said, what do you think? He said, yeah, it's pretty good, Well, we got to show Kemeny. So what I had to do was take this tiny little drawing, because no producer, wants to see a tiny little chicken shit drawing, right? They don't want to
They're not going to pay for that little thing.
No, they'll pay for this. So you take it down to the print shop on the corner, and you get them to blow it up, and then you have this big drawing, big version of this. And so it's blown up, and you put it on foam core, and you put vellum over that, and then you can reveal it, do the big reveal. And so we take it down to Kemeny's office in Beverly Hills. John Kemeny, an older, bald Hungarian producer, friend of Tibor from way back, I guess. And Kemeny's
very
looking
serious,
at it,
stoic dude.
Terribly serious, and sort of the Alexander Gordon model.
Formal, yeah.
Yes.
Bit, yeah.
So John's, I take it, and I reveal it, like that, and I'm looking at the Minions, and I'm looking at John. I'm looking at John. He's staring at it, and I realize, holy fuck, it's a caricature of John Kemeny. I mean, it's, and I look back and forth, and I'm going, and I said, well, this isn't really written in stone. This is just an idea. He said, no, I love it. The big blubbery lips and the bulbous eyes, and I love. Don't change anything. And I'm thinking, okay, and we go and
what
and
a score! It was
what a score! That might
yeah.
want you like that. You're just like that. And so we were driving away in Tibor's big muscle car down Santa Monica Boulevard. And Tibor doesn't remember this way, but I remember it clearly because I was still, all the antennae were still going like this. Tibor was happy it got accepted.
Yeah.
I
thought we were in for a fight or something.
And I was happy it got accepted, but I was looking at the bigger picture. So Tibor said, that went well, huh? And he said, yeah. I said, did Minion look like anybody to you? He said, well, I said, John Kemeny? And Tibor's driving and goes, oh shit! Did you do that on purpose? He nearly drove up on the side. I didn't, I swear I didn't. It was totally subconscious, right?
Yeah, it came from the subconscious.
And we thought, well, maybe nobody will notice. And like a week later, we're in Toronto. Bill Beaton, who did all the set
design, production designer, yeah.
And we were talking about the thing, and Bill, we storyboarded it and planned it pretty well. And here's the minions. And he looked at it and he goes, it's coming! Like 5 minutes after into our first meeting in Toronto, so we knew we were in for a rough ride there. I think he caught on, but he never bitched me out about it. And he really, I think, gave us so many opportunities to do what we do well.
Yeah, what this kind of work needs is that kind of creative freedom. I remember another stressful moment was after the film was finished and I had to present the director's cut.
Yeah.
And there was so much to do, like with the temp effects, even I had actually, I remember, animated with a grease marker some of the things that were going to happen. Like just like little simple lines.
Yeah.
Like a person walking or doing something.
Yeah.
And
it took tornado.
Going up, that kind of stuff. And I actually made frame by frame just a little thing to suggest.
Yeah.
And then
that's the
it
Norman
just took,
McLaren.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's where that comes out. And there was an incredible amount of sound work and temp music, and we were just up against this deadline. People had flown from LA, from the distributor. They were going to see the director's cut. It was a big deal. We were late. We weren't ready. We were still doing the temp mix to, for the presentation. And oh my God, I was an hour late. And I arrived at the screening room, and that guy from LA, who was kind of a stern, kind of, I remember his name was Steve, I forget his last name, but he was a kind of a tough cookie, He says, Tibor, don't ever make me wait. Blah, 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 blah. Like the worst setup for a fucking screening of a director's cut. I was thought, oh my God, I just fucking ruined everything. All that hard work and just offset it with the stupid mistake of missing the deadline of making the guy wait. Anyways, and then, man, that screening was so tough. I was so scared. And then at the end of it, that guy Steve gets up and he goes, you know what? This is a really good movie. And that was it.
You didn't have a good time during the screening.
No.
But yeah, Yeah, it was a good movie. It is a good movie. It's, it wasn't like what was out there
That's
either.
Right, yeah.
And you had a good cast, the all of them, I guess, most of them. Steven Dorff, of course, is still at it.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of work went into the cast. Like Mary Gail Arts was a real tough casting person. She was really thorough, and she made me look at a lot of people. And this whole sort of wide casting we did, and then from that we did screen tests at an actual studio with a set, and handheld camera, and doing the whole things, and even doing a little editing. And from that we chose the people. It was like it's a process that doesn't happen anymore. I don't think all that much.
Not in films on that level. I mean, it doesn't feel like the low budget effort it was, because a lot of
it was like, homemade kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, we
boutiqued.
It was and again, we were,
Yeah.
we were just a couple of guys prepping this thing for a couple of months.
Yeah.
But that was an important
Step.
preparation period, and we didn't cost all that much,
That's right.
comparatively speaking. But some of the people that are in it, Kelly Rowan, right? I don't know if she's still acting, but my wife, she actually wound up making a movie in New Zealand some years back, and my wife was a makeup artist, New Zealand makeup artist at the time, now American makeup artist. Dom did the makeup on that one, so she got to know her a bit.
Cool.
And yeah, she's a very cool person, and the cast was very cool.
Yeah, we were very fortunate, very lucky.
And Louis Tripp,
Yeah.
who's gone, who's a lot edgier now than he was as a 12-year-old, and Krista Denton, who was a sweetheart. I think she got out of acting. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
All those kids were just, the actors were terrific. It was, and very easy to work with. It was good. Even when they didn't know what the hell we were doing, because we'd have, they'd have to be acting to something that was going to be put in later.
Yeah, that's the big deal, of course, when you're dealing with actors. That how far to push them, how should they be reacting, how big should it be, how little should it be, you know, what is happening in front of them that they can't see, and that's up to the director to, you know, weigh how much they should be acting, or how much,
Yeah.
how big of a reaction it is, and to what they're reacting, and of course where they're looking. That's a whole other issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's the, you know, I mean, different actors obviously will bring to
Yeah.
bear different levels of craft, right?
Yeah.
But in general, once you're on the set with your actor, they're part of your family,
Yeah.
and you get them to do something that's, you know, just outside their comfort zone, within their comfort zone, as long as you're, you know, as long as you get together
Yeah,
and
and
say,
I feel-
listen, we're on the same team.
Yeah, kids have a very broad comfort zone.
Yeah, that's
what
true.
I feel.
That's true.
And that's what you have to take advantage of that to a point.
Yeah.
To get the performance. I always had a very sort of clear idea about the tone of the movie. This sort of enchanted children's movie that sort of pushed to the limits of, I guess, PG-13, a darker fairy tale, but, you know, going right to the edge of what is, you know, good for kids. But I always feel that this idea of enchantment, it really, kids need that, and it develops creativity. And I remember for myself, all those scary movies or TV shows that I saw as a young kid, they all helped to fuel my imagination, you know, including the religious instruction as well. You know, I remember, you know, I took catechism. I remember that was sort of a seminal thing for me. About that scared me, but that fueled my imagination and the idea of, you know, creativity. But also so the tone of the movie, I wanted to somehow transfer that, or to pass that along to, you know, a generation of children that maybe hadn't seen a lot of that sort of thing. A lot of things for kids at that time, I think, were a little bit more campy. I think 11 to 12 is the perfect age for this. Of course, younger kids had seen it. I remember going to a screening where there was like a 10-year-old kid. There was just a small test screening or something, and there was a kid there, and I thought he was sincerely frightened and upset. That's the part that I didn't enjoy.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah, no, you don't want to. You don't want, unless you're a sadist. You don't want to make. You don't want to make.
You don't want
kids,
to lose,
you know,
like, you don't want to waste their innocence. That's
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that concept of,
Yeah.
you know, when you're a certain age, the innocence is like a currency.
Yeah.
You know, and then you use
That's
it up.
interesting.
And then, you know, by watching too many serious bad movies, or, you know,
Yeah, serious.
nasty movies.
Yeah, and there's nothing. I don't think there's anything really mean-spirited in this. And
No, there
certainly
isn't.
Michael's script is
Yeah.
very good, and I think we leavened it a little bit. We made it a little lighter and more.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you brought something to it. I brought something to it.
Had the right ingredients. We brought each our own thing, and we all cooperated and
Yeah.
worked collaboratively.
Well, and we enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Enjoyed collaborating.
I don't know, when I was in the making of the movie, I always thought, you know, it was a movie I felt good about and strong about, but I had always heard stories that, you know, no matter what you feel, it's the rest of the world that matters, of course. Who's going to come and see your movie? I was always feeling good about the work that we had done. But one of the first times that I sort of felt the chance of success, like actual commercial success, that this venture would actually mean something, was at that screening where that guy had freaked out and was really angry at me, and then, you know, at the end he got up and said, you know what, this is a really good movie. Like, that sort of like surprised me and shocked me into thinking, oh my God, maybe this is how it works, you know? Maybe we did do a good job. It's sort of turned into a kind of legacy that lives on, that I wasn't necessarily expecting when we were making the movie.
I didn't
that-
expect we'd be
yeah.
sitting here as,
Yeah, yeah.
as not old men, but as
Yeah.
mature gentlemen.
Still talking about it.
Still talking about this damn thing. Yeah, I know. It's. I mean, I'm glad I put all that detail into the damn Demon Lord.
Yeah.
You know, it makes because that at the
And
time
now
I
with,
thought
yeah.
at the
With
time
the
I thought,
Blu-ray,
am
you're gonna
I-
see that.
Am I wasting my time here? No, you just do. I mean, you just do something that you believe in. We put pride into it, and you just. We basically. I feel this way, and I think you do. Just made a film that we would like to see.
Exactly.
Right?
That's we were sort of true to what we would want to experience as kids, and that sort of played forward into lasted all the way till now. People still are enjoying the same things that we enjoyed about making the movie.
Yeah.
The fun that was it translated. It came across.
It's gone! It's gone! All right! It's gone! All right!
I just want to say this is going to be a lot of fun because I love working on this movie. This is probably one of, well, it's in my top 5 easy. So let's talk about The Gate. The beginning on The Gate happened as an outgrowth or consequence of my being pals with Randy Cook, professionally Randall William Cook. And I met Randy, actually had seen some of his work in magazines I want to say as early as the mid-70s, I would say. I didn't have an opportunity to meet him until I was working with Rick Baker on a project in 1978. And he says at some point, let's go over to Dave Allen's shop. I thought, oh, all right, and whatever you say, Rick. So we went over there, and they were doing a film. I think the day time ended, or the end of the world, or the world ended, or it ran out of time. And they had a bunch of animation models there on standby, which immediately transfixed me because I love stop motion animation, and was one of a generation which was constantly doing a little inner arm wrestle, makeup artist, stop motion animator. And lucky for me, I suppose, because things turned out all right, that makeup won in the tussle. But it just shows you that there was a kind of an equivalent allure to those two areas. So on that particular day, I got to meet for the first time Lyle Conway, who was there, a very talented guy. and like looks like Man Mountain Dean too, you know, like one of the who used to be a big old wrestler, big man. Randy Cook, who is you know, a compact package of talent, and I also I think I met Dave Allen that day, so it was a very auspicious tag along for me with Rick Baker, and so leaping from that point forward, I'm beginning to get a little traction in my separate career in makeup. And I can't remember now how I made the connection, but I got in contact with Randy, let's say around 82, met him for dinner, we hit it off very nicely, and sort of created a kind of an almost mutual admiration society. I mean, I like his sense of humor, he's bright as a penny. Anyway, so I go over to Randy's apartment, and he is working on some drawings. And they're really terrific, because he's a really terrific sketch artist. And he's got these very peculiar little creatures in them. And this is a fairly vivid memory, so I think it's real. You get to be my age, you can imagine your memories. And what they were preliminary planning and sketching of, I think, an actual sequence of a proposal for the gate, which he apprised me of. It sounded very interesting. And he told me all the things we now know, which is that it was not going to be made here, but up in Canada. And I don't think I was working, and I said, any chance maybe I could get involved on that? Or if I did, or if I even did bald-facedly beg for a job on it. But that wasn't in the cards at first, because the producer of the thing was already acquainted with a damn good makeup artist, whose name is Stefan Dupuis, who's originally from Canada, lives here now. And he had worked with Stefan on Quest for Fire. And Stefan and John Caglione Jr. and others, I suppose. So Stefan was going to do it. And Stefan was well able to do it. And I thought, oh, shoot, you know, that's... But, so I saw the rudiments of what Randy had in mind, which developed into the wonderful notion of representing these little characters in the film, which we'll be talking more about, of course. They now have, whereas the word that describes them has become their name, minions. That was the first time I basically had it describe me what they were in the story, and the fact that they were going to be small, about, you know, a foot tall. So what happened is that Stefan couldn't do the movie. And the reason he couldn't do the movie was he had a prior commitment to Chris Wallace to work on the remake of The Fly, David Cronenberg's film, which was going to be done, guess where? Canada. And guess where else? The same studio where they wound up shooting The Gate. Anyway, that's later. So I was elated, actually, because I thought, hey, maybe. And then Randy outright offered it to me. He said, how about you? Would you be willing to do it? I said, willing to do it. I'd be delighted to do it. We began the film actually in my garage workshop, in my combo garage workshop in North Hollywood, where I live. And Randy was very much involved, not just coming in once in a while like, how's it going? He showed up to work every morning along with our very minimal crew. And I say minimal because it was. I think we had 2, maybe 3 people. And even at the high water point, that was only augmented to about a 5-person crew besides myself. And so anyway, well, the first thing we had talked about already, Randy and I, was, okay, well, how big is this minion guy going to be? And Randy said he's going to be, I'm making this up, but it was in essence what he said. He's going to be about as big as me. In other words, you're going to make a mold of me. And we did. We made a mold of Randy with a kind of a neutral pose, which I'm holding my hands out to simulate, and the legs slightly akimbo, and we basically made this mold. And meanwhile, Randy had already come to the party with a fully rendered sketch of the minion. And being very thorough, he had put in all of the pertinent folds and everything. Very little additional had to be, you know, imagined or interpreted into it to make it look like a organic thing. And meanwhile, one of the things that came up early on, and typically, was to at least begin to prepare for the actor who would play a character in the script that was described by just the epithet, the workman. And he was called the workman because it was kind of an interestingly written concept of almost like a little miniature urban legend. Something that was obviously poppycock to anybody over the age of, let's say, 10. But the kind of charming thing about this entire movie is that it's sort of a horror movie for kids. About kids and in a kid's world. And that's, for some reason, sometimes minimized or a little bit overlooked. But that, to me, is the core element that makes it effective. So they cast an actor and they got him down to us, and we made molds of his head and his hands, which I thought were the pertinent portions because obviously wouldn't be naked. And I had also prepared it. The only piece of flat art I did was a sketch of the workman to more or less define what I was going for. But I always knew I would be sculpting it and doing it, so it was just to help me. I saw him as a zombie, a proto-zombie. But I didn't want to regurgitate zombies as we'd basically seen them up to the time. With blue-faced, goggle-eyed, toilet tissue on their face. And one thing I thought of was a wonderful book that I had seen. Actually, Rick Baker had a copy and a couple other people. And it was a how can you say, archaeological book called The Bog People. And it was about people who had died, and in some cases I later found out had been killed, but who were buried in these graves that they had discovered in portions of Europe where they had been buried under peat, which is as I take it, a kind of a combination of vegetable matter, mostly mud and so forth, and it had the effect of preserving them, so that you had almost, in some cases of some actual bog people who were disinterred, you saw their facial features completely intact, but they had been pressed and distorted out of shape, like I'm doing to my face over the years. And I thought, wow, great, that's different. So I based the look of the workman on that, and also a couple tried and trues like the filmy fish eye and so forth, and it all contributed to it. We had time, but not a hell of a lot of time. Typically on a costume, classic costumes, like Creature from the Black Lagoon is the example, meaning original and best, really. Also created by a team of people. And it was made out of a dense foam latex, an organic material, where you have the advantage of obvious things, where you have flexibility and you have a certain elasticity. I would use my hand and say, that's flexibility, but if I could stretch my hand, that would be elasticity and hit the microphone. Those are useful things. I felt I had to look at the possibility of sacrificing one of those things in order to make these suits quickly enough, because the downside of foam latex is it's a diva. It sometimes sets up and it sometimes doesn't. That's like, no, it does. Not under these, not under these strictures that we're looking at, not under these delivery dates. And Randy said to me at the beginning, if I have 15 of these, 15 replica suits that we can get people to fit by basically having a casting call for height as well as general configuration, I can use those to create local groupings of much fewer or up to 15, but I can also photograph them, and they will give me enough of a kind of a core group that I can rephotograph them and then rephotograph them again and wind up with 45 if I want them. By later them with the prevalent special effects technique of the day, still well in use, which was traveling mats. So 15 suits, I thought, ooh, boy, okay. So I made the molds when we finally got the sculpture of the body. And by the way, it's a good time to credit one of the major contributors to my tiny shop, which is a gentleman named Kent Jones, also interestingly enough from Canada. No relation as far as, he wasn't forced on me. I was happy to get him. His assignment was to basically do most of the suit from about the neck, we're talking arms, the hold on thing down to about the knees. I did the head and the hands, You can call those hands claws. And then the feet for the minion. And those were designed in such a manner so that they could be pulled on separately. Randy's thinking was that it would give us a little more latitude fitting slightly different people within the general physical requirement. And it worked very, very well. They looked, if you stood a foot away from them, blotchy and kind of crude, but by the time they were reduced by Randy's plan, they looked quite credibly what I wanted them to look like. So we missed another bullet as far as we didn't have to slave over, careful little paint jobs. This stuff was like Jackson Pollock. Throw it at it and move on to the next one. But not recklessly, with a kind of an idea behind it. So we had that going on also. We also had a scene in which our little hero, played by now adult, then, I don't know, 7-something years old, maybe, I don't know, Stephen Dorff, he is cursed by the Lord Demon and winds up looking at his hand that's got an eyeball there. And Randy did that a couple of ways. He does an actual optical, which incidentally is his own eyeball, and that looks and blinks. But then at another point, right before Stephen, who's, going to get rid of this mark of the devil, he gets a shard of glass and pops it. And right before he does that, there's this horrified staring eye. Well, that's the prop I built. And that's based on Stephen's own hand. He took it off him, and then I sculpted the eye and made the eye and all that jazz. So that was also something, these jobs, you just tick them off. You find an available chunk of time and you say, okay, I can do the hand today. And you don't know exactly how much longer it's going to take, but you just plow for it. And that's how I did it. I was definitely up there in Canada past about the first 2 weeks, I think, of shooting, because I was still racing to get ready and getting things in crates, etc., etc. But I got up there in time of necessity to do the first shot with the workman, certainly, and remained there until the end of the shoot, and often assisted as I could Randy in certain things. Like what certain things? Well, I'll tell you what certain things. One example would be when you see the louvered door in the closet where the kids are trying to struggle with the workman coming out of literally the wall again at them. You see some minions kind of chittering away as silhouettes. Well, that's me on one side with two of them doing this, and Randy on the other side doing this. That's all that is. And I'm sure we must have held them in such a fashion so we didn't get our entire arms in. So, hey, who cares how simple it is if it works? And also there are scenes where they're kind of carving their way through the door. Well, I had mechanized one of them so it could do this, one of the arms, the actual miniature arms. And we had that poking out, a week in the prop door. So it looks like they're getting out of the bedroom, let's get out of here. We met a guy up there named Fumi Mishimo, this wonderfully polite, enthusiastic young man, who was the nephew of our unit still photographer, whose name was Takashi Seda, and Japanese, both of them. And Fumi had recently come to Canada, emigrated from Japan, and was just nuts for all this stuff. And he was hanging out all the time, almost to the point where sometimes I wished he wasn't there because, you turn around, there'd be Fumi, like, bah, Fumi, tell me when you're coming away. But again, Randy, I don't know what it is. He sensed in Fumi Mishimo something that was sure as hell there, but I didn't know it, which was that he actually had a lot of potentiality in this area. And Fumi began to help out Randy in certain things any way he could. He helped me out enormously because he became sort of the de facto costume supervised coordinator would be a good word for it. And I mean hands-on, getting all these young men and women, two women and one big shoot, into these minion costumes, which was no little thing. It wasn't just like, here, put on the coat, pull on the trousers, good, go to set. Because then they had to take a material called dental dam, which is sheet latex used by dentists, hence dental. And the dam part isn't when the guy gets the drill in his tooth. Damn! No, it's an actual dam to isolate a tooth. So it's sheet latex. We had a lot of that, and of necessity, because of the nature of fitting these different, mostly men, we had gaps, and sometimes because of the stiffness of the material that I had to, because of the time frame, make these suits out of, we had to bridge those gaps. And some of the guys were taller or had longer necks, or were in some different configuration when the sculpture was done over the replica of Randy Cook that we used. So that we had, and still can see in the movie, I hate to see them, but they're there. You know, you got this long neck sticking out, almost pop, you know, coming out so they look like they're wearing, you know, what they are wearing, a costume. Obviously they were trapped in the soup, and I mean what you're thinking of. You know, bathroom breaks, everything, when they were totally in there. But the head could come on and off, and that was about their only relief between shots. Except for one guy who was in a tight shot where we actually, you know, had to fill a gap that we had, you know, unavoidably, with the same technique, and he was good and trapped. And I have a picture which will be on this disc of Fumi giving him oxygen, literally, between takes. I want to say the other delightful thing as a participant on the movie is typical experience of working in the film. Okay, yeah, you do a thing that's a physical effect in a confined space. You see it in dailies. That's understood. But when you have little tiny monsters chasing a little girl into a house, you don't expect to see that in dailies. We did. We did. When Krista's legs, and it was her, go running up the wooden steps from outside when we first see the minions, and they chase right up the stairs after her, that was shot with the forced perspective technique. And hats off to Randy for the concept and the whole, you know, basically visualization of it. Hats off to the late William Beaton, who was also an architect, not just a production designer, for coming up with the geometry that made it work. And the lighting. Peter Bennison was the second unit DP. Frank Carrere, the physical effects guy who helped set the whole thing up. It takes a lot of people sometimes to make a thing of that dimension work. The smaller the film and the budget, the more work and responsibility goes to what personnel they can afford. More work, longer hours. By the time the movie was finished, it's the old thing, you know, stick a fork in me and I'm done. And we all felt like that. But I think we all felt like we'd had a good time, you know, in spite of becoming the Walking Dead ourselves. And we knew we had an interesting thing in the can, and we were all kind of like, boy, I wonder how this will go over. Well, I believe it went over to the extent that it was the most profitable Canadian film, almost, that had ever been produced in the country, or in the running for, which is wonderful and amazing. And not that surprising, because I think once it got discovered, almost like, well, look at it, you know, by the fan that saw the lurid poster, but effective, when it first came out, must have said, hey, you gotta check this out. You know, this isn't what, go see it. Just go see it. And so I'm very happy that it turned out like that. It had been basically a hell of a lot of fun to work on. And it was a great working with Randy. I'd known him, but the first time I'd actually worked with him, and it was a real pleasure. The beauty of working on The Gate with Randy was that he absolutely maxed out the potential that we had. Now, what does that mean? It means we had this much time, this much money, no more, and this much of a corridor to shoot these things. And I want to give full props, by the way, to Tibor Takish, who went to Randy. Randy didn't go to him. Tibor went to Randy specifically on the basis of some stuff that he knew Randy had done. And I'm very proud of the way The Gate worked out, because I think the way that things were shot was brilliant as far as some of Randy's setup, and certainly good enough in every other angle. You know, I would like to have seen the workman a little more, but he wasn't written anymore. And anybody that agrees with me, thank you. But, you know, he's right. He came out of the wall, he grabbed the kid, went into the wall, and then he pops up again in the bedroom, and he's out of there. So, you know, that's the movies.
I was a film critic in my native Hungary and became a producer of television programs about film. But what I really wanted to do is a producer of motion pictures, of feature films. So I left Hungary, I went to Canada and started with a television series called Night Heat, which was a late night CBS series. And one of the original partners of Alliance, which was Canadian, became a media conglomerate. That was during the tax shelter years in Canada, and the Canadian government gave, I think, about a 30 or 40% tax shelter on films. So our main focus was to get movies financed on this scheme. Because there was no involvement, creative involvement, production involvement, like it is now with Telefilm Canada. We could basically do whatever we wanted and just take a tax credit, and that was our financing, which came in at that time. The Canadian dollar was very cheap compared to the US dollar, so it was a very attractive deal for American companies. And this was also a movie where we partnered from the beginning with an American company, New Century Entertainment. I think it was Norman Levy's company who was running 20th Century Fox at one point, and he came to us with John is an old studio producer who knows the whole business and loves to hand over, used to know, he died, and loved to hand it over to his pupil, and I was one of them. And John actually said, okay, here's the gate, you're going to produce this movie. I just bring in some of the ingredients and deal with, on some of these I deal with the American distributor, but you're going to make the movie with Tibor Takács. My job with co-producer was to take the financing, take the script, do the casting, actually make the movie. While John was just shaking his head and said, no, I don't know if we should do this or we should do that. So he was like a cartoon caricature of the old producer, and I think I learned the most from him. I learned on this movie that producing is from tiny elements, and all those tiny elements come together to become the movie. Michael Nankin's script was much darker than the movie turned out to be, and I believe it was Corinne Mann, the distributor, who said, let's try to make a movie which gives the kids the same roller coaster ride as a horror movie, but without guts, without blood, without any violence and anything that will affect them. So basically it was a PG-13 horror movie. And I think if you watch the movie now, and I did watch it because I'm working on the remake of the movie, it's really a mild and gentle movie. We shot the movie in and around Toronto at a place called Kleinburg, which had a studio for no particular reason, just it was cheap. And John Cameron said, doesn't matter what it is, go there and shoot it there. It was a shithole. It was like a barn. It fell apart, but nobody cared about this because inside there we built a two-story house. Actually a fantastic, I don't know how I still remember these, set builder family from Montreal came to Toronto and built what we call the Brochu family. They built a two-story building inside the studio, which was a big thing at that time because most of the movies were CBC movies, one or two cameras, left, right, center, and then that's it. And this was like a real production. But apart from that, in the second stage, which was like an outhouse of the Kleinberg studio, Randy was working with oversized props, creating the miniature effects for the movie.
Shut up, you guys. What do you want? What is it? Come on!
The interesting thing about production was that during pre-production, while Randy was talking to us, we really didn't understand everything, I must admit it. He was talking about oversized force perspective. First of all, my English was really bad at that, so I didn't understand what force perspective is. The casting was very interesting in this movie, and that's if there's anything funny. And I just realized yesterday when I looked at, and when you told me today, that it was made in 1986, which is 30 years, it's a lifetime, 30 years ago. And it was Steve Dorff's first movie. And I clearly remember the day when Steven arrived for the first time to the set. He was 12 or 13. And where's my Winnebago? And we said, well, you don't have Winnebago on this movie, we don't have money for that, but you have a trailer outside, or he said, I need the chicks, I need the Winnebago. Without that, I'm not doing anything, he said. And he was half serious. It was fun to find kids in their fear and being in danger and saving the world, which is an evergreen subject. Last week I watched Stranger Things, and throughout the movie I watched, of course, I binged it and watched all episodes in one. I told my girlfriend, this feels like the Gate, and it has lots of influences of the Gate. And said, no, you think everything has influences of the Gate. And then I looked at the internet, and there's a post on the internet, most of the influences of Stranger Things in one poster. And in the poster, Steven Spielberg is this big, and Louis Tripp is this big. And star. And I remember the New York Times article where they compared to the Gates budget, the craft service budget, the food budget of Ishtar. And they said probably the food budget of Ishtar was higher, and our initial opening was higher than Ishtar. So that was good, and it was good for the movie. It was really, really well distributed. We sold it to a company who took it around the world. And I still meet people 30 years later, it turns out to the 30th year, who say, oh, the Gate, I bought it that time and it built my company. It became the highest grossing Canadian movie of that year. We got the silver here, the Golden Reel Award, which was awarded to the highest grossing Canadian movie. There are certain countries in the world where it performed spectacularly. And it became a classic. There's a lot of people, directors, writers who still consider this as a basic horror movie. It was very important for the 80s.
You've been
Every year I find someone, because I own now a small foreign sales company, and as I told you, every year I find someone who says, in my country, in Greece or Germany or Japan, it was huge in Japan, it's a cult movie, and it's a crossover movie. It was a cult movie as well as a movie for general audiences, for scares.
I hitchhiked to Toronto in 1980 to visit my girlfriend up there. And her boyfriend was Tibor Takas. And Tibor came down to LA with a real film he'd made called Metal Messiah. And he was kind of pitching it around town as a demo reel, trying to get a job in LA. And he'd stayed on my couch and hung out and became buddies. And so I knew him for several years as a friend. And he was finally he got the job of directing The Gate. And he knew me as an actor. And I think he was maybe a little insecure about working with the actors, especially the kids or something. So he wanted me to come on as a kind of a coach for especially the kid actors, but also the adults to help erase their Canadian accents, which was important to the company. They wanted to have it be kind of an American-sounding film. So they were looking for somebody in LA possibly to be the actor for the workman part, because so much of the prep for that was in LA. And so rather than having to fly an actor down from Toronto several times to get that prep stuff done, they felt it would have been better to get a person who was already in LA to take care of all that. So I kind of fit the bill for that as well. So I kind of had a few different things going on with that. Primarily just whatever I could do to help him get the film made. You know, he would sit in the car. I would drive him up to the studio, and I would drive the car while he worked on the day's shooting and stuff like that. And drive him home after 14 or 15 hours on the set, so he could sort of nod off. Just taking care of Tibor was a big part of it too. And done the big heavy prosthetic before, and yeah, that was quite the adventure. It took many hours to put the makeup on. I remember getting up like at 3 in the morning or something, and getting picked up and driven to the studio by 3:30 or something, and sitting in the chair for like 6 hours, getting this makeup put on. Very painstaking process. I had a full chest and head mold made, and all the pieces were in sections, and they were pasted on, they glued on with surgical glue. And so there was a couple pieces on the face, and a chin piece, and lip piece, and nose, and all little pieces that they came on one at a time got put on, and then this collar part that came up my neck, and it was glued down as part of my ripped open shirt chest part that was visible. And the scalp part with the kind of scraggly wisps of hair and all that. And there were the full scleral lenses. Definitely made the eyes look dead. And actually there were dentures as well. Dentures, wonderful thing that I had to go to a dentist for and get a mold made of my teeth for those in LA as well. And yeah, they were pretty scraggly. I kept them around for Halloweens for years after that, but somewhere along the line lost them. Steven Dorff was a character, really funny kid, bright, natural talent. So it was great working with him. A lot of energy. Louis Tripp was kind of